Good evening. My name is Aubrey Mollinedo, and we thank you for joining us this evening for our community advocacy training on policy mapping and opportunity atlas. This evening, we have with us Benjamin Schwartz, who is a community fellow at Lehigh University. He is working with Fred Stein at the Delaware Riverkeeper Network, and he has placed together this presentation so that we can help our advocates in the communities better understand what's really happening around them and how it is that they can get the information that we need. And if you've been a part of our community advocacy trainings in the past, this is all that we've been promoting and advocating with Clean Water Action, Delaware River Network, in partnership with the William Penn Foundation, who funded our grant initiative. So Fred, if you just want to say hi real quick.
Yes, thanks, Aubrey, and welcome everyone to this, the training video, and Aubrey said it perfectly. This is just another tool of the many tools that we're offering in this series of webinars. So Ben put together this this mapping program and this mapping webinar to help teach us all how to use this tool to enhance our toolbox so we can tell stories about the watershed and community organization or community issues in better, more colorful way, maybe is a good way of saying it. Thank you, Aubrey.
Thank you, Fred. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. This recording is going to be handed out in an email with the other recordings for those that have registered for our past and our present webinars. So we'll get that at a later date. If there are any questions or comments that are pressing on your minds, please feel free to put it in the chat or to put it in the Q&A. I'll be monitoring it, and we will answer and address whatever it is that we can at the moment. Whatever we can't, we will address it in an email to the participants that are on this recording. So we thank you again, and without further ado, we're going to hand this over to Ben.
Hey everyone. So yeah, just to start off, my name is Ben Schwartz. I grew up in Morristown, New Jersey, and I'm currently a master's student at Lehigh University in the Environmental Policy program. I've been going to Lehigh this is my 5th year. And as a junior, I took a course on environmental justice. And it was really that helped me decide that I wanted to get more involved with my community, with helping others, which is why I decided to become a community fellow and started working with the DRN. So today I will be introducing 2 programs, Policy Map and the Opportunity Atlas. And we're going to be looking at the data and the information that they have available, and then how you can utilize this to your benefit. This information can be applied to any community in the United States. I first began to use these programs during some research studies that I was doing on Cleveland, Ohio, which I will briefly look at in a second, just as a little brain teaser. But later on, we'll bring the focus back to the city of Trenton and other areas like East Trenton, where I know most of you work and live. By the end of this presentation, I hope you'll be able to see how these 2 programs can be really helpful for you to tell a story about the conditions and circumstances in your local community, city, county, or state. So I'll begin by asking a quick question. So this is the map of the city of Cleveland. When I was born in the state of Ohio along with my father, and my dad grew up in Cleveland his whole life. So I'd always been interested in the area. I had a project to do on residential segregation. And in that class, I had to look at and analyze what that meant for the city of Cleveland. For one part of this, I wanted to convey to the audience the severity of the segregation that persists in the city. Over the next few slides, I'm going to present 3 graphics, and I would like you to just think about which one stands out the most to you, which one helps you best understand the issue of segregation in the city, and which one you think would be most influential. So the first is just a simple visual graphic. This has data, and it says, the city of Cleveland is the 8th most segregated city, and it remains one of 22 hyper-segregated cities. The next one is a graphic that contains some segregation metrics. the average of this ranks city as the 5th most segregated in the United States. And the final is a map that I created. This map shows percentage of African Americans who live in each census tract in the city. And the darker the red, the higher the percentage. And at the bottom, it says that the city of Cleveland is one of the most segregated cities in the United States. So looking at these three, my question to you is, which of these best shows that the city of Cleveland is highly segregated and is one of the worst in the United States? And I know we can't do Q&A. If I was in person, I would go around and ask you guys these questions. But I think for me, when I first began using programs that did GIS mapping and policy mapping, and I saw a map that looked like that one on the right there, I immediately knew that that was the most influential and I could really get across the most information by doing some work. And now I have to say that graph on the right, it did take me a little while to create. I did this using a formal GIS, Geographic Information System software called ArcGIS, and it involved downloading data files and a bunch of other work to make this look as it is. However, this map right here, I created using Policy Map. And you can still see the same trends look about the same, where there's the outline of the city of Cleveland, and it's much more dark on the right, showing that there's a higher percentage of African Americans who live in this extremely highly segregated city. And I just really wanted to start this off by showing I could create a very similar map to one that took me a few hours of work in a few clicks on Policy Map, which it has the data, it has the information available that can be really influential for reports that you may be making. And I'll get into creating a map and how I did this in a second. But first, we have a little background information to cover. So this slide right here looks at a little bit of the terminology and the types of data that are available in these mapping softwares. I'll try to make it as easy as possible. Spatial data is associated with like neighborhood statistics. So this is demographics, which is like race, or this is income or median household value, or something that revolves around health status. So these are things that are really describing your neighborhood. And these are the most used type in policy mapping. It's the colorful one that you're going to see. Point data corresponds to a single point on a map. And this can be used to show a bunch of different statistics and data points, usually related to something like crime, the location of a brownfield site, or an abandoned house in your community. These are single locations you would see as if you were looking up something on Google Maps and it was showing you all of the locations of restaurants nearby. And a polygon is the most unconventional. They're really just overlays that come on to a map that don't really follow necessarily a single geographic boundary, but they can be really helpful in showing a region with, say, low supermarket access or a boundary around your whole watershed. And they can really define an area that you're looking at. And lastly, we're going to look at a quick background on spatial organization, is the way I had to phrase it. I couldn't think of a better way. Moving to these different types of data. So the way that geographic data, when we're looking at an area, is defined can be done by a bunch of different ways. The main one is the census tracts. So a census tract is a small subdivision of your county. US Census Bureau tries to make it between 2,000 to say 6,000 residents, and they usually follow a visible feature. They try their best to define a neighborhood. And they're usually designed to be, relatively homogeneous. So a similar income level or a similar demographic that lives in an area. And these are used in the majority of mapping analysis. So this little orange area on the right is the city of Trenton, an outline of the city of Trenton. All the numbers in between there are all of the different census tracts that exist in the city of Trenton. And now I have written census block group, and I'll move over. So a census block group is an even smaller subdivision. So this is one of the census tracts. It's census tract 22 in the city, which is located in East Trenton. And all of the little dotted lines there are census block groups. And they may provide a more accurate neighborhood analysis. That's something that may be easier to find and will look better and maybe shows the story better than the full census tract does. And these aren't perfect. They're never going to be as good as going into a community and saying, what is your neighborhood? Where does it start? Where does it end? Because, you know, that may be really hard to answer and you would have to use something more complicated. But they do give a really good option for analyzing and mapping the data that the US Census Bureau and other government agencies has to offer. So now moving on to the actual programs. So Policy Map has a lot of information available, as I've listed below. They've got a lot of sources, a lot of types of information. And I know I've mentioned it several times, but it's an online database and a mapping software, and it's available for free to be used by the public and for nonprofit organizations and other groups such as research institutions. You can pay to have a subscription, which has more in-depth data and a few more functionalities. And so not all of this data and the sources listed to the right are available, but all of the government data, so, you know, the stuff that I have listed on the right, the census, the CDC, labor statistics, the EPA and other government agencies, and a bunch of nonprofits have their data for free and available to everybody. And the best part of this is that it allows us to take all this US Census data, which I can tell you from looking at it is a drab, it's Excel sheet on Excel sheet. It doesn't look like anything. But what they've done is they've allowed you to take that data and map it onto a geographic location. And with that ability, it becomes really powerful in potentially showing trends and situations in your community. So right here, I have a few steps. I'm not expecting you, and I don't want you to really read through this. This is mostly focused for the recording of the webinar. So if you want to go back and look through the steps that I did without having to watch me go through Policy Map that we'll do in a second, you can look at this and see, okay, how did he get it started? Same with some of these helpful tips that I have written here. I'll be going over these as well as we move out onto Policy Map. So as we go, I'm going to start and we're going to go to the actual program and the website. So you start, you know, going on Google, you look up Policy Map, and it'll bring you to this page. And right here or right here, these are where the public edition of Policy Map is for free. You could click to open the map and you can begin doing our mapping. So the first thing that I like to do when I see something like this is look at what's available. So here you have all these drop downs. If I click on it, it shows me a bunch of different data that they have available. I can also search data up here. So if I want to look up something and I don't know which of these categories it's going to be, I can just look it up. But I always prefer to start by looking at the area that I'm interested in. So I would say we look up the city of Trenton. And so what it will do is it will bring us and zoom in on the city of Trenton and it'll put an outline around there. And we can now, we got the city of Trenton up here, we can begin to look at, you know, potential issues. And it starts off, I would say, by asking the question, what do we want to show? What do we want to see? What's something that we care about? So being an environmental policy major, one of the things that I'm always interested in are brownfield sites. And who is located nearest to these brownfield sites? Is it rich? Is it more wealthy people? Is it people with a lower economic status? Is it one demographic over another? Are there trends that relate to that? Mapping can really help us out. So I'm going to first start by going to the demographics tab and choosing race, ethnicity, diversity. And they've done a great summary here for everyone. This isn't available in the normal census, but it's predominant race and ethnicity. So when I click on this, it's going to get all colorful. And these colors are listed here in the legend. The greens are a higher percentage of Black individuals in the census tracts. As I hover over, you can see what the actual statistic looks like. The orange is Hispanic and the blue is mostly white people. And so one of the things that I need to preface this is, if you want to look at a bigger area, you can always search that up. If you want to look at Mercer County, it's somewhere around here. But as I zoom out, you'll see down here where it has the shaded by. Now it says shaded by zip code tabulation instead of census tract. As you zoom in and out, Policy Map is going to change what data it's using and what geographic state. So it may look at county data versus census tracts if you zoom out far enough. I just want to put that out there just so you know, if you're looking around this site and it's not on census tract anymore, if you want to know what happened, it's probably you zoomed out. But once you zoom back in, you can see that, you know, it'll start going back into census tract, and you can always just click and switch this whenever you want. And now one of the really good things that they have available is there's a lot of information here. If you don't really know what it means, or if you want to learn more what it means, if you click on this I, it'll bring out a definition of where this data came from. And if you want to look up more, you can click the See Data Dictionary, where it has all of the definitions of all the data that they have available. But predominant racial or ethnic group between 2013 to 2017, that seems pretty reasonable and straightforward. And for other data, as we'll look at it, so maybe we want to look at income. So we look at income and per capita income. Well, we say, okay, in 2015, 2019, this is the information available. They have other years. So if you want to look at a trend, you can see what this looked like over time. Has the city of Trenton seen more per capita income growth, or has it seen less? And I think that's a really useful thing that we can look at. But back to demographics. So we have this predominant race or ethnic group that we have mapped out on here using a few clicks. And now we want to say, is there a trend related to where brownfield sites are located? So that is going to be located in quality of life. I know it because I've been doing this a bunch, but if I want to look it up, I could search up brownfield. And you'll see here the two different icons that are next to these statistics. So this one here that looks like a little, I guess it's supposed to be a 3D layer, but it kind of looks like a diamond. That's for this layered data, like the demographic. This one right here that looks like the thing you see in Google Maps is saying it's point data. So when I click on this, you're going to get a bunch of points that pop up. And what we can clearly see is that the incidents, all of these brownfield sites, well, they're really located in the city. And the surrounding area has, 1, 2 in these predominantly white areas. So evidently there are a lot more brownfield sites in the city of Trenton, and the city of Trenton also has a higher minority population than the area surrounding it. And so this by itself may not be something that's going to give you the answer to whatever question you have, but it can provide a really good visual to be included in a presentation to show that this trend may be existent. What you do with Policy Map is you can use a screenshot or a snipping tool to really screenshot this area. So if I wanted to, I could screenshot this and then put it into my presentation, along with, obviously that we have to have the legend, or else nobody really know what this is talking about. So another thing that I've been interested in and researched in my time at Lehigh is food and food access. So if I want to look at how do people of different income levels, so maybe the median household income, if I want to look at what their food access looks like, I could potentially see what their access to supermarkets are. But I still have these brownfield sites on there. What do I want to do with these? I don't need them anymore. I can either exit them out if I don't need them at all, or I can click disable and enable, which gets rid of most of them. I don't know why a few exist there still. It's a visual glitch, but I'll get rid of them because I don't need them anymore. And so I would go into, for food and supermarket access, I'll go into health, and we can see food access, supermarket access, and right here you'll see a different icon. So this one is one of those polygons that I was talking about earlier. If I click on it, you'll see something has showed up in another orange color in the city and around it. So this comes from a different source. It comes from the Reinvestment Fund, which is a nonprofit. And they've done a bunch of analysis, and they've said these are areas that have inadequate access to food and food systems like fresh grocery stores, but they have a high demand for it. And they're also of low income, and they don't have the disposable income or the transportation access that another area may have. So this may be another really good sense of or source of information or visual that you want to have in a report or a summary, et cetera, that you want to make. So you can screenshot this. You can find the definition here by clicking on the source Reinvestment Fund, and it'll bring you to that data dictionary I talked about earlier. And finally, another issue I've talked about is gentrification in my time at Lehigh. And what are the causes of it? How do we know that it's happening? It's a really complex issue, but mapping can allow us to take data that's been found and been collected by the US Census and see, do any of these show any trends that maybe indicate that gentrification is happening? So that would be in housing. And we could go to household turnover, which is, and moved in 2010. So the darker the color here, well, that means more people have moved in recently. And that could potentially, along with some other data that you may find and other maps you create, show that there's potential and that gentrification may be happening in the city of Trenton. It may be higher here in these few census tracts and lower in a different area, which is something that you may not get if you looked at just a statistic for the city as a whole. But with mapping, you get to see the variation. And now I've collected and screenshotted these maps earlier. It will load, and I put them side by side. And so normally I would usually include the legend for all of these because I think it's really important that you know what the data is representing. But to fit them right here, I couldn't put them all together. But I wanted to show you that, even though on the free version of Policy Map, we can only have one of these data spatial layers at a time. So that is the per capita income, the race, or the estimated percent of all households that moved in. If you put them side by side, you can start to create the narrative about what the statistics are showing that is happening in your city. And then based off of the information you have from living or working there, you can really confirm or deny if this is what it's actually looking like. And they can be really, really influential. And so these three maps are really just the beginning of what you may be able to make for the city of Trenton, for Mercer County, or for the entire Assunpink Creek watershed, the geographic area, et cetera.
And if you don't mind, one of the questions was, can we zoom into East Trenton's brownfields layer to see how the brownfields in that community are characterized and what info is shown under Policy Map?
Oh, perfect. We can do that right now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good time because after this, I'll be moving on to Opportunity Atlas, and I'll have questions at the end, of course. Quality of life, we'll go to environment, brownfield, and I'll get rid of this layer because of the estimated percent of all household incomes, because we don't really need it right now. And I'll make sure that this is enabled. So now we can look at East Trenton over here. And when you click on this and expand, it has property info and has a few other, areas about the remediation use. So this is all info that the EPA has taken and put out and put as a geographic map to this specific point. So as you can see also that it has, it says right there, like 17 data points at this location. That's basically saying they don't want to show every single point, but they're showing a summary of a bunch of points that are located in one very close area. So if you click on that, well, you'll see a bunch of brownfield sites that are categorized by the EPA. And if you wanted to, you can screenshot this map right here and use another software to draw the map of East Trenton on here to show what it looks like. And if you do a little digging on what these brownfield sites are, or if you live in the area and you know where they are, you can really communicate what the effect that these are having on the local community. And that's where I think it's really helpful, because for somebody, if I didn't really know much about the area, or I lived in a different part of Trenton, I may not understand what effect that these brownfield sites are having or where they are located. Say they're located near, if they're located near a school or located near a park, it may be really influential to know about them and to be able to put them on this map.
Ben, this is Fred. If you see in the city of Trenton, the yellow line that goes up, it's Trenton Freeway.
Yep.
If you go up just after that turn as you're going north, right there, that's in the East Trenton community. If you can zoom in on that and just see.
Yeah, and so that has information available on it. It's got information on the property, what the zip code is, the address, the assessment data, what's been known. And I'm pretty sure if you click this get reports, you can look at, actually this may not be available. This may be available to just paying subscribers, but let me just open that map again. It should have it saved right here, but let's hope. There.
Did you discuss the difference between the free version and the paid version?
Yeah. I talked about it for a second, but
okay.
Some functionality differences that exist between Policy Map that's available to the public and policy map that you have as a paid subscriber. This multi-layer right here gives you the ability to choose ranges and sort of layer one, say, demographic and income at the same time. But that's why I think it being able to show certain maps together can be really useful, because you have those listed side by side. And there's a few other things that if there's a few data points that policy map has paid for to be able to show that you may not have access to. But a lot of the stuff that comes from all government agencies and some nonprofits are available for free on policy map that can be utilized.
Okay. And,
So
and I
I'll
was,
get- oh, yeah.
and I was incorrect. The, if you don't mind, if you have the moment to go back to that same brownfields, I said that it was north of the Trenton. If you take your cursor and just go to the right,
Mhm.
scroll to the right.
This one?
Yeah, I know it's right next to the creek. You see right next to the creek. Keep going.
Oh, yeah, like right
North,
right
just
here?
north, and yeah, right there. Though you just had, nope, keep going north.
Oh, there you
Right
go.
there. That's one of the brownfield sites, excuse me, that particularly the East Trenton Collaborative had, was looking into, and we just had some good information shared by the city. But what does it say there under policy map?
Yeah, so, it could, about the amount of cleanup funding, what if the assessment's been done. And then you can use this information if you want to look on the EPA site. If you know what the name of this place is and the address, you can find probably more information available on there about these locations. If there's no more questions here, I'm gonna move back onto the,
Thank you, Ben.
no
Yep.
problem. I'll move back. And I've got the maps up here that we just looked at. And we can see the trends that may be beginning to develop as we start mapping some of the data that's available to us. So now a little bit on the Opportunity Atlas. So the Opportunity Atlas is a bit different than Policy Map, and it's a real good complement to it. The Opportunity Atlas was developed by the US Census and Harvard and Brown University, and they did a bunch of statistical analysis on social mobility data to create this website to answer this question I've listed here. Which neighborhoods in America offer children the best chance to rise out of poverty? Which is a really unique approach to the data that they have available. So for the most part, data on income would be, what is the average median income of a census tract in this city? What the Opportunity Atlas is saying, and the data they have available is what are the children who grew up in this city, what do they look like when they get older? And so it gives a lot of information on what communities are doing to set up their children for success in the future, and maybe what communities don't have the resources to really be setting people up for success in the future. So, the two types of data, as I said before, are children's outcomes in adulthood, which is the really unique feature of the Opportunity Atlas. And they also have some neighborhood characteristics, so housing market information and demographics that would be more consistent with what Policy Map has. So like we did in the past, I have these steps for using Opportunity Atlas. I'll zoom through these a little bit because we'll be actually looking at the site in a second. Same for the helpful tips. But I do want to preface this as we go on the site. The Opportunity Atlas is a lot better at communicating how to use their website. And they offer, as it is listed right here, this guide, which is a written report that's a few pages long on how to ask a question and how to approach answering it. Same with the Explore stories that we'll get to. Those are going to be featured in the bottom left of the website, and they'll show you a tutorial and an introduction to it. So to move on, we'll go look at Opportunity Atlas. So I've searched this up on Google, and I'll open it up, and it begins by prompting us with the question that I covered before: which neighborhoods in America offer children the best chance to rise out of poverty? They talk a little bit about what they've done, and then you click Begin Exploring, and they ask these three questions. They ask where, what, and who. And this is really the way that we've approached looking at Policy Map, and the way that we're going to approach looking at Opportunity Atlas, of what is the question that we're trying to answer, for who, at what location, etc. So we'll begin by asking where. So this where, as we have with Policy Map, it gives you the option to look up a city, a county, or an address. So if you want to look up Trenton again, we can look up Trenton. So as you'll see with this map, it's already color coded. That's because Opportunity Atlas always has some data being shown. It doesn't have the opportunity like Policy Map does to just be a blank map. But the data being shown can easily be changed. So the children's outcomes and adulthood data can be selected and dropped down over here to show more results. And you can choose which data you're interested in. And as it was with Policy Map, if you hover over this little eye, it'll tell you where that data comes from. This is from federal income tax records, and it'll give you a bit about the information. This data is also available to be dropped down here in the top right with this little drop down, and I'll give you a little bit of information on what the data means and it'll give you the entirety of the data that they have available. The other really interesting thing about this top right is it has this little panel right up here. And this allows us to answer the question of who. So by clicking on these little data points here, we're able to change what demographic group we're looking at. So if we have all selected, this is basically saying for each census tract in the entirety of the United States, but in Trenton, what is the income of a child that grew up there at the age of 35? And it's 25K and around here, maybe 40, etc. But this is for all demographic groups. If you want to say, okay, well, what if that child grew up with low income parents? You just click on this parent income and it changes it up. And it changes up the coloration because the data has changed, and you could change the child race and the child gender as well if you're interested in what those demographics and how they compare. And the last little bit that we need to cover is this color scheme in the bottom right. So it's on selected group right now. I'm going to change it to everyone at first. So what everyone is doing is when you select this color scheme, it's comparing the specific census tract to the national median. So this is saying, well, the census tract, the median here of 44,000 is the median income of children at the age of 35 if their parents were low, if their parents were any income. Now, if you change it to selected group, you'll see the bounds are 10,000 and 80. That this changes a bit, goes from 10,000 to 60, because we've looked at the selected group of low income. And what that's doing is it's now changing the median to be the median of this selected group that we have. And the last color scheme they have available is this on-screen functionality. And it sort of changes it to look at in shading to be, well, what is shown right now on the screen. I find that one to be a little more confusing. And I usually stick between everyone and selected group, as I find that they have the most applicability. And also, it's really important that when you're creating maps on something like Opportunity Atlas, that the color scheme for the data stays consistent. So if you start off by creating a map with everyone selected, you probably want to have everyone else, every other map that you create using the Opportunity Atlas to have everyone. So the color scheme stays consistent. So the audience doesn't have to get confused about what color it now means what. The great thing compared to Policy Map that Opportunity Atlas has, besides the introduction and the tutorial, is they have this feature down here as download as an image. So if I click on this, it'll format the information that I have available. It'll put the legend and the title on there, and it'll make a really easily presentable map that shows some really great information and data. So that's what I've done here in this slide. I took that information that we had on the household income at age 35 for children of low-income parents. I've done it for the entirety of Mercer County, and I've labeled Trenton. So these two labels I added. And I think it's really, you're able to visualize and show, well, what is the difference in the community that kids in Mercer County grew up in? What effect may that be having on their lives in the future? And as you see, as we move further away from the center city of Trenton, the colors become lighter and eventually more blue as we get to communities that have a higher income for children that grew up there. And now this may be useful information for conducting a report on showing, maybe we need to have a more money put into education or put into other things such as community groups or et cetera, whatever report you may be looking to create, if there is some type of social mobility data that you really are looking for that could help communicate to others that this is an issue, Opportunity Atlas likely has that available, or they have something that can act as a similar representation of the data. And I hope that that's covered it well. Opportunity Atlas has a pretty similar functionality to Policy Map as we looked at before, selecting data, selecting location, and changing things up. So it's pretty similar. Once you learn one, it's a little easier to learn the other. And that's about it for the actual tutorials on how to use Policy Map and how to use the Opportunity Atlas. We'll certainly get into questions now that we have, but I hope that after covering these two resources, you feel more comfortable in attempting to use them to aid in your community work, because they're really effective at displaying information visually. And in my opinion, and a lot of others, they're a lot more intuitive for helping people understand how spatial problems are affecting a region way better than any graphic or visual that you'll have that's just a table or a statistic or a normal graph. And so with that, I hope that this mapping seems a little less intimidating, that it seems more approachable, and you feel that you can open up Policy Map and start playing around, because I only learned about this a couple of years ago in my program, and I started doing it the exact same way. I started looking around and seeing if any of this information could really be useful to the reports that I had to create. So I appreciate everybody for listening to me speak. It's been a good time. I really enjoy and value the information I've learned from mapping, and I hope you are able to get that as well.
Ben, this was outstanding. So I am applauding you, because I wish that when I was coming up in school and doing all of my reportings, is one in particular about the food desert in and around Mercer County, in particular with the city of Trenton, I would have been able to really razzle dazzle everybody with my presentations with just this information using the policy mapping. If anyone is wondering, well, what does this have to do with upstream, downstream advocacy along the Assapequa Creek, right? Well, what I get from this is, when we're looking at upstream, we're looking at the more affluential communities and the communities that have more resources than those that sit in the basin, right, in the downstream. And all of the effects that happen upstream affect those that are in the basin downstream, meaning Trenton, the city of Trenton. So when you mentioned in the Opportunity Atlas, as you start moving up and away from Trenton, how the colors change, well, that to me is really articulating the differences visually, right? You get a visual understanding of how this all works. Most oftentimes when we're living upstream, we don't think about the effects that we have on the people that are around us and down below us, right? Because we don't see it visually. Now, if you put together the GIS training that we've done, the data mining training that we've done, and now this policy mapping and Opportunity Atlas, and if you were to really sit down and look at everything that we have learned over these webinars, and then put them into context with what's going on in and around our communities, you will have the information that you need to make and articulate a presentation to those that can make changes in and around us. So I encourage everyone to, when you get these recordings, look these things over and play around, like Ben said. Another thing is, introduce these to your children, okay? Introduce these concepts to your children at younger ages, like middle school, because they will adapt most readily to this type of information. And this will give them another layer of education that they may not find in their school training unless they pay for it, like Ben did, right? The other thing is, I encourage those of us that are into the nonprofits to look to see what data is available. And when you're looking for grant funding and you're looking to really articulate what your mission statement is and what it is that you want to do in our communities, look at what's going on statistically, look what's going on visually in your communities through these mappings, because you might find something that other people have missed, or you may be able to partner with people that have a better understanding of this, and you can add to the developmental changes. Now I'm going to look into the chat because I see that there's some statements maybe or here. So everyone is thanking you for a great presentation. They really enjoyed it. And so this is a keeper, Ben. When you leave, what are your plans from leaving the fellowship? Because I know you're supposed to be graduating soon, right?
Yes. So I've been applying to a few environmental policy positions. Once done with that, after maybe a year or two, I intend to apply to law school to do environmental law, hopefully do some nonprofit work. And that's where I came in my class on environmental justice. I realized there's a lot of really deserving communities that don't get the representation and the help that they need for stuff like, figuring out and showing people that you are at a disadvantage. You have more brownfield sites nearby, and that'll lead to issues. So, doing what I can to help out some really good people.
Well, Ben, I'm excited for you, and congratulations on the upcoming graduation. And I look forward to seeing great things from you, and who knows where we'll meet along the line, but you'll definitely be called upon to do some more webinars and training with us. So don't get too busy so you can't come back and revisit us. Fred, before we close out, let's hear something from you, sir.
Well, I would just, you were inspirational when you talked about encouraging the people on this webinar and the people that will be watching it later to share it with their children, and because it won't be as abstract to younger kids, to the younger adults or the younger people, because they're much more in tune to using data and mapping and stuff like this, but also, and I mentioned this at another webinar, there's a new law in New Jersey passed by Governor Murphy in 2011 or 2021 rather. It's called the Laura Wooten Law, and it's a program that brings civics into middle and high schools, and it brings in where they're training teachers right as we speak on how to get young residents of New Jersey more informed so they can take a more active role in politics, in policy as they grow older. Even simple things like, how do you know the difference between fake news and real news? How do you kind of like better understand all this information that's coming at us, because it can easily take you in the wrong direction, if you're hearing just dribble from one side or the other. But it's the Laura Wooten Law, and it's bringing, so teachers probably starting in September of 2022 will be introducing these new curriculum into the classroom, and this policy map and opportunity atlas could be part of that information that the students are learning, and maybe they'll be putting that into their presentations, Aubrey, where you wish you would have had it to spice up your presentation. They're going to be down, they're going to be right there doing it a lot, in their sixth grade presentation, So
that would be awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
And Laura Wooten was our longest standing board worker.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. Great history there. The County of Mercer is very rich in history, and so is the city of Trenton. And what we want to do is we want to just showcase that it's more about the the civil wars that we've had, and the founding fathers, and all of those historical moments that add to the foundation and what's so interesting about the city of Trenton. But as we start to look at all of the other areas where there was a lot of injustices that were done against the people, especially people of color, our grant helps us to not only just provide a tool chest for individuals and activists to help improve our communities, but they're really to help improve communities of color where the information is not always disseminated amongst us. And he who has the information is the one that has the power, right? And so sometimes it's the same people that are going over and over to these webinars and going to these planning meetings and different meetings. It's the same people, but that information is not being passed along maybe, or it dies out with the few that attend, right? And sometimes people don't really know how important these environmental injustice situations are to us, how detrimental they are to us, until you start showing them maps and you start showing them how to really find the information that they need through the Oprah requests and Open Public Records Act and other avenues of research such as those that we've trained them on. Some people may get it, some people may not get it, right? But we want to make sure that we offer the opportunity to our communities. We've seen here, Fred, you and I, we know that if we send this information out to your community and my community, that your community has experience in doing this work. So they're more apt to sign up and to want to find out and dig a little bit deeper, right? Because they've been exposed to these things in school, like maybe Ben has. Whereas in our communities, we may not have had those opportunities. And so that in and of itself is an injustice, right? And so we can dig a little bit deeper in that. But when we start to train our people and really just move along the lines and show how through the waterways we're connected, through these opportunities and these partnerships and these resources, we're connected. And what affects you will eventually affect me. When we start to show that, then we start to build community outside of our little walls, right? So I thank you all for taking your time and not finding it robbery to spend time with us in the evening. You could have been having dinner, you could have been studying for your LSAT. Ben, I'm very interested to find out how that's going to go for you. I'm looking at a few things myself and I'm like, oh boy. So, I'm encouraged to see where this all takes us and how memorializing these videos will give us an opportunity to always have them, like Fred is always eloquently saying, in our tool chest and readily available so that we can do the work that we need to get done in our communities. And it's not just you all teaching us, but you're partnering with us as well. So we thank you for that. And we bid everyone a good night. Thank you for spending your time with us. Ben, again, thank you. That was outstanding. I look forward to great things from you. Fred, thank you for connecting us with Ben. He is definitely a gem. So we appreciate you all and have a good evening. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Have a good one.